In this video, we'll introduce unit conversions and unit ratios. We'll start by looking at a few examples you're probably already familiar with. The first question we're going to look at is how many minutes are in 1 hour and how many minutes are in 1 day. So to start, we know there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So I'm going to write that 60 minutes equals 1 hour. We know that those two are equivalent, and we also know that there are 24 hours in 1 day. So to answer our first question, how many minutes are in 1 hour? 60 minutes. But how many minutes are in 1 day? We can see that there's this intermediate unit of hour to get us from minutes to hours to days. And I'll write this out. So we can either go from minutes to hours to days, or in this case, we're starting with 1 day, and so we'll go days to hours to minutes. Now, if we were to do this informally, we would say, okay, every day has 24 hours, and every hour is 60 minutes. So my informal computation here, or my informal calculation that I can do, is to take 60 times 24. And for that, I will get 1,440. Now, this one we're very familiar with and is pretty straightforward. As we get into more complicated unit conversions, we often need a formal process for things that we don't necessarily just have a visual of. So let's look at what this would look like with a formal calculation. So I'm going to start with 1 day, and that's equal to a single day, so I'm going to write 1 day. And now I'm going to multiply by something that's known as a unit ratio. So 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour. 1 day is equal to 24 hours. I can create fractions that have one of each of those in the numerator and the other in the denominator, and it's a unit fraction. So here, I want to get from days to hours to minutes. So I want those day units to cancel. So I'm going to put day in the denominator. So I have 1 day in the denominator, and in the numerator I'll have 24 hours. That single step there would leave me with the number of hours. To get to minutes, I want hours to cancel, so I will put them in the denominator, and I'll have 1 hour down there, and in the numerator I will put 60 minutes. Looking at how these cancel then, days will cancel and hours will cancel. And so what I'm left with then is 24 times 60, and my units are minutes. So I have 1,440 minutes. And if I were to summarize that, I would say there are 1,440 minutes in 1 day. And that first question we were asked, how many minutes are in 1 hour? There are 60 minutes in 1 hour. I'll make sure I answer that. The next example we'll look at is to determine how many inches are in 2.5 yards. So the first things we want to do are to identify some of those equivalencies. So 1 yard is equal to 3 feet, and 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. If we think about how we're going to do this conversion, we're starting with yards, we need to end in inches. So we're going to go yards to feet to inches. Informally again, let's do this informal calculation. So we know that we have 2.5 yards. We know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard, so we could take 2.5 times 3, and we know that each foot has 12 inches. We can multiply by 12, and we'll find that to be 90. So there are 90 inches in 2.5 yards. Again, this one was very straightforward, so we could do it pretty informally. For our formal calculation and unit conversion here, let's take that 2.5 yards, and we can use YDS for those units when we abbreviate them. And that will be our same 2.5 yards. Now, to change those units to feet, we can multiply by this unit fraction that has 1 yard in the denominator and 3 feet in the numerator. That will get me from yards to feet. After that, I can multiply by a unit fraction. I'm going to need feet in the denominator, so I'll have 1 foot in the denominator and 12 inches in the numerator. When I look at those units, yards will cancel out, as will feet, and I'll be left with inches. So when I multiply this across, 2.5 times 3 times 12 will give me 90, and I'll have 90 inches. So we know that there are 90 inches in 2.5 yards. Now that we've done a few familiar examples, let's summarize what a unit conversion is and what a unit ratio is. So we're asked, what is a unit conversion? What is a unit ratio? So a unit conversion is a systematic method for converting from one type of unit of measure to another. The example that we looked at was to convert 2.5 yards to inches. There are many other types of unit conversions that we can do, though, and that we'll study. Another one would be to convert between the English and metric system. So something, for example, like converting 1 foot to centimeters. And a final one, we could do things that have multiple dimensions. So we could convert 2 square feet to square inches. That would be something we're measuring in 2 dimensions. We could also do it with 3 dimensions. There's a last unit conversion we can do, which involves rates, and we'll study each of these. Now let's discuss what a unit ratio is. So we saw a couple examples of these in those calculations that I did moments ago. A unit ratio is a ratio where the numerator and denominator are quantities, each that have units, that are equal to each other. So let's list a few examples of those. We saw a couple in the calculations that we did. We can write a unit ratio of 1 yard to 3 feet. 1 yard is equal to 3 feet, so that is a unit ratio. Note that, depending on what type of unit conversion we're doing, we might want to write this instead as 3 feet over 1 yard. Another example, and this is one that we'll look at when we convert between inches and centimeters, but 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch if we were converting with some metric and English units there. And that again could be written as 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters. Coming from 2.54 centimeters being equal to 1 inch, we can then make a unit ratio with one of those in the numerator and the other in the denominator.